Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. I am Pavneet Kaur, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Milton Friedman, one of the most influential economists of the 20th century. Mr. Friedman, thank you for joining us today. To start, what inspired you to enter the field of economics?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Growing up during the Great Depression, I saw how economic hardship impacted people's lives. I wanted to understand why it happened and how policy could prevent it in the future.
Next question. Your approach is quite different from others, like Keynesian economics. Could you tell us more about those differences?
Absolutely. Keynesians believe that government intervention and spending are necessary to manage the economy, especially during downturns. I see the economy as resilient and argue that a stable money supply, rather than extensive government involvement, is key to long-term stability.
Moving on, what role should the government play in maintaining macroeconomic stability?
The government's role should be minimal, mostly to ensure a steady and predictable environment. When the government overmanages, it often disrupts natural economic cycles, leading to instability rather than stability.
There's another question. When it comes to inflation, what's your stance on the best way to manage it?
Inflation is fundamentally a result of too much money in circulation. By keeping the growth of the money supply controlled and predictable, inflation can be managed effectively. It's really about discipline in monetary policy.
Now, about unemployment. What measures do you believe are effective in combating it?
A flexible labor market is crucial. High unemployment often stems from rigid regulations or wage controls that make it difficult for employers to hire. Reducing those barriers can create jobs and allow the economy to adjust more easily.
Switching topics, in times of major economic shocks like the Great Depression or the 2008 financial crisis, what's the ideal government response?
In times of crisis, central banks should ensure liquidity to prevent panic, but extensive intervention can create dependency. For example, during the Great Depression, monetary contraction worsened the situation. The key is balanced support without excessive intervention.
Now, let's discuss consumer confidence. How significant do you think it is in the recovery process?
Consumer confidence is essential. When people feel secure about the future, they're more likely to spend and invest, driving economic growth. The best way to support confidence is with stable, predictable policies.
Now, let's discuss consumer confidence. How significant do you think it is in the recovery process?
Consumer confidence is essential. When people feel secure about the future, they're more likely to spend and invest, driving economic growth. The best way to support confidence is with stable, predictable policies.
On to a related question. Critics argue that your policies can lead to income disparity. How would you respond to those criticisms?
Free markets allow for unequal outcomes, but they provide equal opportunities. Much disparity comes from barriers to competition, not the market itself. With the right access, people have the chance to improve their economic position.
Shifting gears a bit, what role do you believe fiscal policy plays in promoting economic growth?
Fiscal policy should remove obstacles to growth, like high taxes and excessive regulation. I believe government spending should be disciplined and efficient. Unchecked spending often creates debt rather than true growth.
Now, regarding central banks, what's their role in controlling the economy?
Central banks should focus on keeping inflation low and predictable. Attempts to fine-tune the economy often do more harm than good. A steady hand with the money supply is usually the best approach.
Switching to international trade, how important is it to a nation's economic health?
International trade is vital. It fosters efficiency, innovation, and competition. My view is that markets should remain open, with minimal tariffs and barriers. Trade restrictions tend to protect select industries at the cost of overall economic welfare.
One last question on inequality. Is economic inequality an inevitable part of the free market system?
Some inequality is natural. It reflects different talents, choices, and efforts. The goal should be fair opportunities for all, rather than forcing equal outcomes. Inequality becomes problematic only when opportunities are limited.
In speaking of government roles, how active should they be in regulating industries like healthcare and education?
I believe in limited intervention. The private sector tends to deliver higher quality and efficiency in healthcare and education. The government's role could be to ensure basic access without heavily distorting the market.
Finally, when a government needs to provide economic stimulus, how can it balance short term relief with long term fiscal responsibility?
Targeted temporary stimulus can help, but it must be paired with a plan to reduce deficits over time. Excessive stimulus often leads to inflation and long-term debt, which harms the economy more than it helps.
To wrap up, what do you think today's economists and policymakers can learn from your theories, especially in our globalized world?
The core principles, open markets, limited intervention, and stable money supply, apply universally. Globalization presents new challenges, but these basics help economies remain adaptable and sustainable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman. It's been a pleasure hearing your insights.
My pleasure as well. Thank you for the thoughtful questions.